Hello and welcome again to PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale history, where we'll be taking a look at another character from the roster and examining their moveset in close detail. Today we'll be taking a look at world-travelling treasure hunter Nathan Drake from action-adventure title Uncharted. Following on from the successful formula of the Indiana Jones movies and the already hugely popular Tomb Raider franchise, Uncharted features a roguish lead who travels the world in search of long-lost ancient secrets. But here's the twist. Nathan Drake claims to be the long-lost descendant of famous explorer to Queen Elizabeth I, Sir Francis Drake. He's also a bit of a wisecracker, and despite his extensive knowledge of ancient history, he's also not particularly bright at times. As one of the major success stories for the PS3, Nathan Drake's inclusion was inevitable, and he's a welcome addition to the roster. So let's take a look at his moveset, starting with one of his intros. Throughout the Uncharted series, Drake carried a journal around with him where he made notes, doodled, and stuck in bits of relevant information that he found. Generally, puzzle sections involved you using clues that Drake had written down in previous areas to uncover solutions. This diary was incorporated into Drake's default intro, where he also mentions Shambhala, the ancient Buddhist lost city that Uncharted 2's plot mostly revolved around. Drake also pulls out his diary for one of his taunts, as if beating his opponents means that things have calmed down enough for puzzle time. While we're on the subject of intros, Drake tends to get battered and bruised and tossed around by mercenaries, pirates and cultists at every turn, but no matter what, he just keeps getting back up again. One notable example of this is during Uncharted 3, where Drake is thrown through a window into a marketplace filled with goons. Despite being roughed up, he gets to his feet ready for the inevitable battle. It seems very similar to two of Drake's intros. They may not be referencing just this specific moment, but the similarity was notable. His final intro may be based on this particular taunt from the Uncharted multiplayer, but it also likely just references Drake's very jovial personality in general. So on that note, let's move on to combat. Combat in the Uncharted series typically took the form of cover shooting, but running and gunning was also a thing, where you simply ran up to an enemy firing your gun wildly at them. Drake could carry two different types of gun, a handgun and a long gun such as a rifle or shotgun. He could only carry one of each at a time, and picking up a new one meant dropping the old one. You got all that?
Know how to shoot a gun, genius.
Run and gun was often dangerous since it exposed Drake to enemy fire, but it could be useful if you were in an enclosed space and could catch someone by surprise. It could also be followed up with melee moves, which we'll discuss later. Cover shooting was less quick, but it was safer, allowing Drake protection from enemy fire and the ability to gradually recover from wounds inflicted on him. As is typical of cover shooters, Drake could peek out of cover in order to return fire. It was also possible to use cover as a way to hide from enemies and perform stealth kills. Both of these central aspects of Uncharted's combat were implemented into Drake's moveset in PlayStation All-Stars. His neutral triangle sees Drake perform a run and gun move which can be followed up with a rifle butt, just like how melee moves could be performed in Uncharted, while his down circle on the ground has Drake dip down below a small cover wall to protect him from opponent attacks. The weapon Drake uses in all these situations in PlayStation All-Stars is the AK-47, pretty much a staple of shooting games and inevitably a common weapon in the Uncharted series. It's the single most common long gun in all three PS3 games and the Vita title, and always appears fairly early on in each game. The majority of Drake's other weapons in PlayStation All-Stars are handguns, and the most prominent is the Magnum. This is the Wes-44, a fictional variation of the Smith & Wesson's 6.29 classic, and is the signature weapon of Drake's friend and father figure, Victor Sullivan. Drake gets to use it at rare points in the Uncharted series too, and it's a very powerful weapon since it can kill with a single shot. That'd be why it's so rare then. The gun makes an appearance in PlayStation All-Stars as Drake's side triangle both in the air and on the ground. It remains just as powerful, but it doesn't kill since it's not a super. It just causes massive knockback and gives Drake a lot of AP to reference how strong a weapon this is. Another commonly seen handgun in the Uncharted franchise is the Uzi pistol. Often called a Micro 9mm and later the ARM Micro in Uncharted 3, the Uzi pistol is a small submachine gun that Drake tends to pick up from enemy soldiers and is often carried by soldiers with riot shields in Uncharted 2.
Damn, I'm a good shot!
The gun appears in PlayStation All-Stars in a very bizarre move called Uzi Spray, where Drake will fire the Uzi downwards while in the air. When Drake breaks into a museum early on in Uncharted 2, his partner and later enemy, Harry Flynn, hands him a gun, despite the agreement to be stealthy and not to start gunfights.
Oh, that's brilliant. Guns? What are you thinking?
Relax, Gandhi. They're tranquilizer guns, totally non-lethal.
The Tranquiliser Dart Gun only appeared in this portion of the game, but it could be accessed through the game's rewards menu and purchased for in-game money. It was a very simple weapon since it could only contain one dart at a time and had a long reload time. It also couldn't be used at very long range. but for a specific stealthy purpose it was good enough. It makes an appearance in PlayStation All-Stars as one of Drake's circle moves. Its range is still poor and it has a large cooldown due to the reload time, but it does cause a status effect on opponents since it can slow them down and make them incapable of jumping. Outside of weapons, Drake also had a number of melee options in Uncharted. At the centre of all of this was the Brutal Combo, which was a basic 3-hit combo that could be performed at any time. But on top of this, there were also Steel Fist moves, which were moves that Drake performed after running and gunning someone. Typically, Steel Fist moves involve Drake softening up an enemy with gunfire, and then finishing them off with a melee move. These melee moves include a jumping punch and a slide kick. These melee moves were translated into PlayStation All-Stars as Drake's square moves. Drake can still perform his basic Brutal Combo, but he has also gained the ability to perform his slide kick and haymaker Steel Fist moves without needing to soften up an opponent first with gunfire. Drake's other melee moves and throws come from more context-specific moves Drake can do in hand-to-hand combat. These include the drop kick, based on another Steel Fist move, the punt kick, based on a move Drake can do when he has higher ground, the flip-up throw, based on a move performed while Drake is on lower ground, and the double swing, seemingly based on a stealth takedown from above. In addition, the back punch throw could be based on a move Drake performs on an enemy near a wall or table, or on this particular stealth takedown, and the mighty kick could be based on a move in Uncharted 3 where Drake kicks away an enemy after activating a grenade on their belt, but without the explosion obviously. Please note these are just the most likely origins, since some of them aren't exactly like the moves from Uncharted, but they are notable similarities. But there was another aspect to Drake's combat that didn't involve guns. Throughout all of the Uncharted games, Drake could pick up MK-NDI grenades for explosive fun. Initially, the grenades in Drake's Fortune were fiddly and annoying because they utilised 6-axis controls, but this was dropped for normal analog stick controls and Among Thieves onwards, and they became much more useful. Since Drake often found himself in tight spots up against entire armies, the grenades were highly useful items to have, since they were great at taking out multiple enemies in a single explosion, or as a distraction, allowing Drake to pick off enemies while they stop shooting for a moment to try and get away from the impending explosion. However, they can damage Drake just as easily, and for this they were given a red aura trail and an obvious beeping, simply to make them easier to avoid, especially when enemies throw them at you. Drake has the ability to throw grenades in PlayStation All-Stars, but they're not as useful as they were in the original games. They tend to fly in a wide arc and are reliant on opponents just standing around while the grenade goes off. They retain their red aura and beeping for both accuracy and to make them easier to avoid, just like in the original game. But grenades weren't the only explosive weapon in Uncharted. In Drake's Fortune, you could pick up the M79, which was a long-range grenade launcher and one of the deadliest weapons in the game. In Among Thieves, this was replaced with the M32 hammer, which had largely the same function. Its most prominent use in the sequel was taking down a helicopter that was chasing Drake. The M32 hammer makes an appearance in PlayStation All-Stars, where it basically acts as a much more useful version of the grenades. Like its original appearance, the explosive round can explode on contact, unlike the grenades, which gives it greater opportunity to be used. Unusually, they gave the explosive rounds the same red aura and beeping as a normal grenade, despite the fact that this didn't happen in the original games. So, you think the grenade launcher was extreme? Well, in the later chapters of Among Thieves, enemies began to start carrying around huge aircraft-standard Gatling guns because there's no kill, like overkill. Even more ridiculously, Drake could later pick up these weapons himself and carry them around like the heavy troops, because that makes sense. The GAU-19 was its own class of weapon, as it replaced neither the handgun nor the long gun. It was a very slow weapon since it massively decreased Drake's movement speed, and it took a while for the gun to charge up before shooting. It was useful if used appropriately, but being unable to take cover while using it kind of turned Drake into a sitting duck. The GAU-19 makes an appearance in PlayStation All-Stars and is an interesting move. Just like its original appearance, it's bulky and slow, but can be powerful if used correctly. Drake in PlayStation All-Stars merely fires a stream of bullets in an arc, then chucks the gun away again, and he can't move while using it. Now let's talk about a few things that aren't guns. During the course of the Uncharted games, Drake would need to traverse perilous climbing sections. Occasionally, Drake would encounter vines and ropes that he would need to swing on to progress.
Sure, let's just swing across on the 70-year-old rope.
Rope swinging was fairly rare in the Uncharted series, only appearing in a few select locations, and was just simply a way of making the climbing sections more interesting, rather than anything particularly revolutionary. Rope swinging appears in Drake's moveset in PlayStation All-Stars, replacing the running gun in the air, while Drake will swing on a rope, firing his AK. At various points in the series, Drake would travel across long distances, making use of a zipline, using his gun as a makeshift handle. It was another rare set piece in the traversal system, and there's not much to discuss there. The zipline makes an appearance appearance as part of Drake's moveset, acting as both a means of moving around the stage, but also causing damage if Drake hits an opponent while on the wire. A lot of the Uncharted games involved climbing, whether it's climbing up mountains or ruined buildings or other assorted structures that Drake just can't open the door to. But sometimes things go very wrong for Drake, resulting in things crumbling on him. This can often include the actual floor, particularly after a landing. For some reason they decided to turn this into a move in PlayStation All-Stars. While it certainly demonstrates this alarmingly common thing from the games quite nicely, it does still look quite odd. Also, how does Drake materialise a floor just so he can fall through it?
I have no idea.
Right, moving on then. Finally, there's the most infamous move in Drake's arsenal, the barrel. In Drake's Fortune, Drake could encounter various explosive barrels throughout the game. Sometimes Drake would have to shoot them to make progress, other times shooting them would help in combat, while another instance had them as a hazard as Drake and his partner Elena Fisher travelled upriver on a jet ski. So that's where Drake's barrel comes from in PlayStation All-Stars. This is yet another odd move because Drake can't just spawn barrels whenever he feels like it in the original games, nor does he tend to kick them around. Now it's time for costumes. Drake is typically seen in jeans and a long-sleeved t-shirt, an outfit suitable for the dirty and dangerous work he often finds himself involved in. Naturally, this is how Drake appears in PlayStation All-Stars as his default, specifically using his outfit from the bulk of Uncharted 2. His alt colours for this outfit come from his appearance in Vita's spin-off Golden Abyss, and the outfit worn during the section in the French Chateau from Uncharted 3 as well. In Uncharted 2, Drake found himself injured in the mountains of Tibet and wakes to find that he's been taken care of in a small secluded village by a rather awesome man named Tenzin. Aiding Drake, Tenzin offers him a jacket stitched together using hide from animals hunted by the villagers, which Drake gratefully takes and wears for much of the final portion of the game. This is Drake's pre-order outfit in PlayStation All-Stars. All colours are sadly not obvious, but the red belt of the green variant likely comes from Tenzin himself, as he was seen wearing this during his appearances in the original game. During Uncharted 3, Drake spends a lot of time in the Middle East, and to match the sandy surroundings he often wears an outfit that blends in, and it's also the outfit he wears on the cover of Uncharted 3. This is his unlockable outfit in PlayStation All-Stars, with alt colours having no clear origin from Drake's original appearances, unfortunately. Finally, at the beginning of Drake's Fortune, Drake is seen wearing a wetsuit from an unseen dive. As a note, this is an Otzel brand wetsuit, referencing Daxter's species in, well, Jak and Daxter, also developed by Naughty Dog, who developed Uncharted. This is Drake's downloadable outfit in PlayStation All-Stars. As for alt colours, once again, they're hard to nail down, but I can't get past the fact that this particular alt colour looks a lot like the scuba gear in Crash Bandicoot 3, seemingly making the outfit reference every Naughty Dog franchise in one go. The next alt colour made reference Drake's appearance in spin-off motion comic The Eye of Indra, and finally there's a black and white variant that could be an odd reference to the suits worn by Drake and his crew early in Uncharted 3. Maybe? So we've covered all of Drake's moves now, so it's time for a quick recap before we move on to the supers.
Level 1!
In the second Uncharted game, Drake's travels often found him encountering propane tanks littering the landscape. Why these tanks were lying around and why there were so many of them were questions that never got answered. However, they did have a purpose. While the explosive barrels gave Drake the ability to create big explosions around groups of enemies, so too did the propane tanks. Even better, Drake could pick these up and throw them around. While in the air, Drake could prove his cowboy skills and shoot the tank. This means he could throw the tank into a crowd and explode it, or he could use it to just blow stuff up. This became Drake's level 1 super in PlayStation All-Stars. It works the same way. Drake conjures up a propane tank and throws it, and from there he can choose when to shoot it. It's pretty accurate to the original games, only now the explosion is a guaranteed kill.
Level 2!
For Drake's level 2 super, I searched far and wide for a sensible explanation, and my best guess is a little abstract. In the first game, there are two instances of falling pillars. The first was when Drake and Sully found a chasm they needed to cross, so Drake shot an explosive barrel, causing a pillar to fall to provide a bridge for them. The second instance was when Drake crossed a rickety bridge over another chasm, and the pillars around the room began to crumble down around him. But sometimes Nate was the one causing large stones to fall everywhere, since there were instances of Drake pushing large blocks around throughout the franchise. These two elements appear to have been combined to make his level 2 super. Drake pushes over a massive pillar in the same way he'd push blocks, and the pillar falls just like the numerous pillars in the first game fell.
Level 3!
Warning, it's pretty much impossible to discuss this level 3 super without massive spoilers for the storyline of Uncharted: Drake's Fortune. If you do not want that game spoiled, please stop watching now. Otherwise you may carry on at your own risk. Okay, let's load up the cutscene.
Oh, man.
The temple must have been built around this.
Around what?
A statue. A gold statue.
A huge gold statue. And look here, these people, they're worshipping the damn thing. At least, I think they're people.
Of course. El Dorado, the Golden Man. Sully, it wasn't a city of gold. It was this. It was a golden idol.
Man, can you imagine what that thing would be worth now?
Drake's Fortune, the first game in the Uncharted series, saw Drake on the hunt for El Dorado, which turned out to be a huge gold statue. But something wasn't quite right with it. After hours of searching the Uncharted island, Drake encountered an old Nazi bunker and found a projector from the Nazis and a note from Sir Francis Drake.
My end is near. The devils hunt for me in the darkness. The gold of El Dorado bears a terrible curse. The Spaniards have unleashed hell and become as demons. My men have all been murdered, leaving the task to me alone. No ship will depart this island. I destroyed them all and drowned the cursed city. A thing of such great evil must never leave these shores. In my final hour, I commend my soul to God. May He have mercy on this unholy place. Francis Drake. My God.
Later on, we discover that this curse is very much real. The statue is a sarcophagus, and the body inside carried a virus that turned people into creepy zombie creatures known as descendants. Prior to the revelation of the curse, we actually encountered these slippery, wet, naked guys, especially in the Nazi bunker.
Jesus, what are those things?
It's the Spaniards, Sully. They never left.
Descendants were tough and speedy little guys that attacked en masse and caused massive problems for Drake later on in the game. More often than not, you merely had to survive in a mass of them until you could escape to a place they couldn't get you. Generally, if you saw these guys, you ran like hell. Fortunately, at the end of the game, Drake managed to drop the sarcophagus into the ocean, never to be seen again. Unfortunately for Drake, the sarcophagus emerges from the water again for his level 3 super in PlayStation All-Stars and spreads its curse onto his opponents, turning them all into descendants. They can attack Drake during the super, packing quite a punch just like in their original appearance. However, Drake gained some assistance in the form of Eddie's golden gun. Eddie Roger was a pirate in Drake's Fortune who's working for the bad guy and has an obvious rivalry with Drake. He always carried a golden desert eagle around with him. Following Eddie's untimely death at the hands of the descendants, it seems that Drake has taken this gun for himself. In the original games, the only way you could use this gun was by unlocking it from the game's cheat menu. It was a pretty powerful gun, packing the same power as a regular Desert Eagle, only now it's golden. Drake carries this gun in PlayStation All-Stars during the super, although it isn't particularly obvious. It can one-shot kill all the descendant opponents, and its shot typically homes in on a turned fighter.
Now it's Drake time. And there goes your Drake.
Since we're heading to the outro of this video, let's discuss Drake's outros. During Uncharted 3 there is a scene in the Rub al Khali desert of Yemen that's so central to the game it was used heavily in promotional materials as well as the game's cover, as well as a stage in PlayStation All-Stars, which we'll get to in a couple of videos' time. The cover, as well as the scene that inspires it in-game, seems to be the inspiration for one of Drake's winning poses. As stated earlier, Drake is pretty cocky, and this is also referenced in his remaining victory poses, although none of these seem to have specific origins. They're just the kind of motions he'll do throughout the series if things go his way, which isn't often. Similarly, most of his losing poses reflect a similar attitude when things don't go his way, when his sarcasm tends to escalate. All except for one final losing outro, which seems to come from the many times that Drake gets beaten to a pulp throughout the series. So that's Nathan Drake. I hope you've enjoyed this look into the Treasure Hunters moveset, and I hope to see you again with another character. Would you kindly stay tuned?